Welcome back, folks. Belly Public Sports Show. I'm your beloved host, Fame Rothstein, sitting here today with a very important and special young lady who's going to talk to us about the legal process uh, in America as she knows it. Because, as you know, we try to give you this is more of a people's show here. We talk about the people and whatnot, and this is something that's very near to me, and she's going to help us with it. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Miss Latoya Bell. She is the executive director or deputy director, pardon me, of the Ohio Justice and Policy Center. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, yeah. So, tell us, Miss Bell, tell us a little bit about yourself. What made you want to become an attorney, and how long you been doing it and whatnot.
So, we go back years.
Okay, okay.
And I'm from Cincinnati, born and raised in Cincinnati, from over the Rhine. And just how I grew up, what I grew up seeing in the old OTR that looked a lot different than this,
Mhm.
kind of piqued my interest into the legal system.
Mhm.
I saw people going to jail and prison, not necessarily for what they did, but because who they were and where they lived. Our community was policed totally different than the West Side where I went to school.
Mhm.
And so, learning my introduction to the legal system was not law school. It was growing up here in Cincinnati. And I knew from an early age that I wanted to be part of that system, but part of the solution and fixing some of the problems. And so I left. I went to Howard for undergrad, went to law school in Texas. I took the scenic route. It wasn't straight through. I took a couple of breaks here and there.
Mhm.
And I got my start in law school as a summer law clerk, as a public defender in Kentucky, actually, in the Boone County office. And from there, it was just, I hit the ground running. I took every opportunity to be in court and learn as much as I could because I knew I wanted to be a defense attorney. I knew I wanted to litigate cases. I knew I wanted to be like in it, not, doing it from an ivory tower. I wanted to be right in the action. And
Mhm.
so a lot of people think negatively of public defenders, but I love my public defender job. And it gave me a lot of experience and exposure that definitely landed me in the deputy director seat, but just also experience and exposure in that courtroom that transcend the experience that some of my counterparts who did not take that path yet.
Interesting. Okay, so you say you knew you wanted to be a defense attorney. So when did you do you have to declare that when you're in law school or something? Like I want to do defense, I want to do taxes or whatever.
No, and one of the things I do in terms of mentoring young folks is that figure out what you want to do, and sometimes you got to sit in seats, a lot of seats to figure out the seat that fits you. I knew I wanted to be a defense attorney. So when the public defender offered me that opportunity, and it was Kentucky, most people were not interested in going to Kentucky, but for me, it worked out because I could come home, I could live
Mhm.
in Cincinnati and that experience. And so I just marketed myself to align myself with as much exposure to the criminal legal system. And so I took that opportunity as a summer law clerk and as a public defender after my second year, which turned into a job offer when I graduated from law school.
Nice.
And from there, I moved back to DC and worked for the DC Department of Corrections in their general counsel's office, which was different. It was still the criminal justice system, but from a different seat. I got to learn corrections. I got to learn what it's like to advise a jail or prison. DC doesn't have a prison anymore, Lorton closed, but they still house everybody in the DC jail. And that's a different feel than, when they're your client as the defense attorney. And so, but it's all related, it's the same population. And so from there, I worked there, but I knew I wanted more in court action, and I got hired by Maryland Public Defender. And again, I went off the beaten path. Most people want to focus and stay in the big cities. I was in small town Salisbury,
Mm.
right outside of Ocean City. We had 5 counties that we covered, and some of those counties had two judges, one circuit court judge, one district court judge. But again, that experience was invaluable. So I didn't have to declare in law school. You can't. It's not like a college major.
Mhm.
But I knew I took evidence. I took Crim Pro. Once you get the required classes, I took all the things that I knew that would put me in an advantage to be a defense attorney. I took some of the hardest professors in law school for evidence because I knew I would need to know it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so let me ask you this: you talked earlier about the public defenders and whatnot. You say people don't like them. Is that a I guess fair characterization of people in public defenders that why they don't like them and whatnot?
I don't think so. I mean, I will say all public defenders are not created equal. And everybody doesn't go into it for the same reason. There are people who go into it because that is work that they want to do. And there are people, unfortunately, who will take it because it's a job. Graduating from law school, depending on when you graduate and where you live, the market may be plentiful with jobs or it may not be that many. And so some people find themselves doing it and their heart's not really into it.
Mm-hmm.
It's work that you have to care about. It's a population you got to care about. You're dealing with people who are actively in addiction, who are actively in mental health crisis and trauma. They're bringing all their problems to you, and you're supposed to fix it in a short span of time. The system and multiple systems have failed them before they became your client. And usually the court really isn't a place to address most of their issues, but that's what we have. That's where we are. And so I think it's easy to discredit and discount the work of public defenders because everything is stacked up against them. They're under resourced, um, understaffed, and they're dealing with the client, the defendant. You got the prosecutor on the other side, their witnesses, and their case relies on the police officer who is an expert, and so it is, they're unfairly criticized. I've worked with public defenders in Maryland, Kentucky, DC, who are very sharp. I've worked with some who've gone to Ivy League schools. And so, I think it is a mischaracterization of them as being the problem when the system that they're working with is the problem.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting there. Um, Now I read somewhere that you like had a very, well, not famous, but very important decision that you won a decision in Maryland. Is that correct?
So some people say, especially if you're a public defender, you're not a real attorney until
Oh.
you post convicted, which means somebody filed a complaint against you, or you make case law. You get a case that's published opinion. And I did get a published opinion.
Nice.
So had a case in Maryland where we had a suppression hearing, and I lost. And again, most people don't expect public defenders to go to trial. I love to try cases. I would try every case if I could, and I tried a lot. Um, and so for me to preserve the record, the issue of on the suppression that it was an unlawful search, we had to try it. You can't plead it. And so we had the suppression hearing, and I had only been in felony court probably maybe about 2 years at that point, but I started off filing suppression motions and having hearings regularly, so much so that it became a joke that, you got a hearing this week? Yeah, I do. Every Friday. I was filing because again, it's my job, and so we had this suppression hearing, we lost, and the judge said, you made some really good arguments. And I was like, well, it sounds like I'm right. So you should grant it. And he denied the motion. And so we went to trial, and my client had no record. He was charged with possession of controlled substance. And I think they initially had thought he was trafficking, but, he wasn't. And it wasn't even an actual controlled substance. It was what they call fake CDS. So tried the case, we lost, found him guilty, he got 18 months, and I appealed. And then that was like April of 2016. I left the job, moved back to Cincinnati. And at some point, I got messages from my friends congratulating me, and I didn't know what it was. And they told me that, the case, there was a published opinion, the conviction was overturned.
Nice. Nice. Now, wait a minute. You say this judge, he gave you the little, you made some nice work like he wanted to give it to you, but he just wasn't going to do it?
You would have to understand this judge to get him, like, what I do appreciate is that he did have case law, and I had case law. And so he'd ask me a question about the applicability of the facts in this case law, and I had counter case law. So, I've been in front of some judges where you can tell, like, it's a matter of routine, they're denying it, they're not listening to you. He did take it in. Why he made the wrong decision, I don't know. And the funny thing is that was quoted in the opinion that the writing was on the wall. He even said they may overturn me. And the appellate judge was like, yeah, you knew you were getting overturned.
Oh
So
wow. Wow. I mean, what was it? Do you think that was more from misogyny or just he just a colorful cat like that?
it, in the beginning, I didn't like most of the judges, and he took to me immediately. I thought he was harmless. I to this day I still don't know why he denied that motion. He said it was close, and I was like, I don't think it was that close, but you know.
Oh, okay. Just no specifics before you get into what what you're doing now. No specifics or anything, but do you see any of that on the law circuit? Misogyny and whatnot against female attorneys.
I mean, I'm female, I'm a person of color, I got locks, you
Mm-hmm.
know. It's not uncommon for me to walk in and people not think I'm the attorney, um, all the time. And again, I practice in a place where there are judges who are 70, 80 years old. There weren't many women, if any, when they first started. And
Right.
so, yes, it's there. I am always reminded, and I'm licensed in Kentucky. It's nothing for me to go to a bar conference and handful of women, handful of people of color. I'm reminded often in this profession that this is it's a white male profession.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yes, I see the misogyny all the time.
Wow. Wow. Gee, okay. We can go off into that some other time. But listen, let's talk about the wonderful work you're doing now. Tell us about your current position at the Ohio Justice and Policy Center.
So I'm the deputy director. So I handle management. I'm a senior management, but I also get involved in the project work. And so what we started off with, the organization started off as PRAC, as Prisoners' Rights Advocacy Center, started by Al Gerhardstein, who a lot of people here know for civil rights work. Um, but it was focused primarily on prisoners' rights, human rights in prison. And then, I always tell people once you work on one problem in the criminal legal system or any legal system, you start uncovering more. And I'm sure Al, and I want to speak for him, but it was hard for him to just only focus on prisoners' rights because you start seeing other issues. And he stepped down, and David Singleton was our executive director for the past 25 years, up until 20 years, up until just this July. And it expanded, and the name changed from Prisoners' Rights Advocacy Center to OJPC so they can take on more besides just prisoners' rights. And with the explosion of second chance work across the nation, OJPC started doing that. Second chance work is removing barriers created by a record. So record sealing, expungement, certificates for qualification of employment so that people who have records aren't limited in where they can work, where they live, and where they can be educated. And then in 2019, the organization created what's called the Beyond Guilt Project, which is different than the Innocence Project. So Beyond Guilt does exactly what it says. It represents the guilty folks. And the focus is primarily on individuals who've served lengthy sentences. So we mostly deal with people with life tail, serious offenders who've shown that they've rehabilitated, but the parole board sees otherwise. And so either through direct representation of parole board hearings, something we call creative solutions, where we try to reach out to the prosecutor and see if we can agree to have a person resentenced to a lesser charge to get them time served. That's the focus of Beyond Guilt. So that's what we do here at LJPC. What we can't change through direct representation and litigation, we have a policy director in Columbus to try to push for policy and legislative changes to move the needle on criminal reform.
Oh, okay. So, okay, let me ask you this then. So, how? Let's say RoboCop done jam me up on some Trump charges, and he probably done violated my Fourth Amendment rights and everything. When do you all get involved? Post conviction or during the trial?
Post conviction primarily. Now there have been some things, every our work is primarily human rights in prison once you've already been incarcerated. Second chance after had a record. Beyond guilt, we're trying to get you released.
Okay.
How we got involved, we do impact litigation, and how we got involved at maybe the trial court level, occasionally. It's not, we're not public defenders. It's not our day to day. But I did, and David will, every now and again, if a person comes in with, one issue for the continuity of services, we may help them out. There was a woman who came here who had primarily an eviction issue, and we don't do eviction, we don't do landlord and tenant, but she had a pending criminal charge that caused her eviction. And because it was a minor misdemeanor, the public defender wasn't going to represent her. And a paralegal brought her to me and just said, I don't know what to do. She's been spinning around. She can't, she's not eligible for services with the public defender. What can we tell her? And then, just talking to her and realizing that, whether she pleads guilty to this, she's going to still be facing barriers to housing, which will eventually make her a second chance client. Let me just see if I can step in and help her now. And I did. I represented her at the criminal trial, at the criminal case, got it dismissed. And what we found out by helping her is that one of her applications for housing was denied because of that open case, that pending case, until we got it dismissed. But she had 2 prior misdemeanors, 1 dismissed and 1 conviction, that was also hindering her. And she didn't know she was eligible to get sealed. And so now we have court dates to get it sealed for her, because again, it's a long-term impact of this. I want her to be in a position where she can rent and have stable housing and put her best foot forward.
Now, see, I done heard you during this conversation here to mention 2 cases where it seemed like the defendant would have been, SOL, and you kind of stepped up for him. Is that something other than ability, to do it? I mean, is that something that a lawyer has to be able to do, care enough to want to put up a good fight for him?
Absolutely. I mean, you can't be in this line of work, whether it's public defender, whether it's a nonprofit working on criminal justice reform, and not care. And again, I mentioned probably part of the reason the organization shift from just human rights in prison is that it's so many issues, and it's like, where do you start? You can't address one without addressing the other. Sentencing reform. Well, that starts really at the trial level. And so, maybe the solution is you got to try more cases and not clean them out, and we're not trial attorneys, but, we have partnerships with the public defender and other private attorneys so that they're aware of the beyond guilt work that we're doing. We support them, in trying to move the needle on sentencing reform, but from different seats. So you have to care.
Nice. Okay. So how does a person I don't know, how do they request you all's services? Like, do they have, do you guys see a database of cases coming out of the state Supreme Court or something?
No. So for each project, the touch point of how you contact us or reach us is different. Human rights in prison, obviously, those individuals are incarcerated. So a lot of times family members will reach out to us. We have application or intake form on our website. Second chance, those services are more community oriented. And so you'll see us, we used to have regularly scheduled clinics, kind of like the public defender's expungement clinic. Now we are doing more pop-up clinics where we are in the community doing outreach and letting people know about what's eligible for sealing. Like just April 1st, there was an expansion of the record sealing and expungement law. So more people are eligible now that weren't eligible in the past. And so you can sign up for our clinics for second chance services. For Beyond Guilt, we do have applications online for relatives or for individuals. We'll send them to the prisons, and people just write us because they hear about us, word of mouth. And you just, we screen cases to see if we can take it. There's qualifications, requirements for Beyond Guilt and human rights in prison, different forms of relief. So they have different screening processes. So that most people will find us on the web and find out how to get in touch with us for our services.
Okay, good, because hopefully some people that need your services are listening. Tell us about some, because I know you got to have something interesting in that type of work. You got to have something interesting on deck going on, don't you?
We got a couple of things. And so I've been involved with Beyond Guilt, and I've kind of focused recently on the aging inmate population. I have 2 clients who we have parole hearings for, and were both found suitable for release. And one is actually getting out in October, has a release date, made parole after serving maybe 27 years in prison. And the other client has been in for 47. And, these are individuals in their 60s. And so the world looks totally different for them
Mhm.
than what it looked like when they got out. And there is, a significant aging inmate population that's going to have to navigate a totally different world that's all technologically based.
Mhm.
Then there are issues of healthcare. Most of them have been in, and their health has declined from being incarcerated, and they're going to need Medicaid when they get out immediately. They haven't paid into Social Security. They haven't, so they're not going to be eligible for any of those benefits. And so their reentry is going to be way more, I don't want to say way more challenging, but it's going to be a different level of complexity than someone who's getting released in their 30s. And so, I focus just kind of by default on the aging inmate population because I think it's an overlooked population. I think it's easy not to even think about what it is to go in at 18 and spend 47 years in prison and then have to get out and figure it out at 65.
Right. Yeah, because that even that little short stint in the halfway house ain't gonna debrief him properly. You
No,
know.
no, that, I mean, going into a halfway house as a 65-year-old man is
There you
going to be
go.
different, than a 30-year-old, and so that's, some of the things I'm working on. We have a program called Expedited. Well, it's not our program, but we are service provider for the governor Expedited Pardon Program, and it's the second chance relief um, that many people don't know about. So individuals who may not have been eligible for sealing, the governor DeWine created Expedited Pardon, and what he does is, there's an application, there's a review, there's a hearing before the parole board. If the individual has been deemed to have been rehabilitated, he'll pardon them, and then the record is sealed and expunged. And so far, we just started this year. This was our first year as a service provider. We've maybe gotten two clients actually get a pardon. We've had about maybe 15 to 17 hearings, and so other clients are waiting. We have more scheduled through the end of the year, and that's huge. To have people live with records for 20, 30 years, finally get clean slate.
Let me ask you this personally. You talked about your published opinion. You talked about getting clients out of the joint. Just on a personal level, how does that make you feel? Like, what do you think? How does that like you read the order, so and so's released.
I mean, I'm so cynical. The first time the client was granted release, I skipped it. Like I saw the vote and I didn't even realize they had recommended for release because I never expect good outcomes. You know, I've been doing it for a long time. And again, growing up so close to it, having family and friends cycle in and out of the system. I mean, what it does is it just keeps me going,
Mm-hmm.
because it's hard work, it's draining work. Um, it's discouraging at times, but if I didn't do it, I always wonder like who else is going to do it. Somebody has to do it. And preferably somebody who really knows the population. Not to say you can't be good at this work if you don't, but I think that's one of the things that may separate me from some of the other people is that, I come from the same community as the people that I help.
Interesting. Why did you say it's discouraging?
So I consider this a game. It's a game,
Mm-hmm.
designed for defense attorneys and anybody pushing for reform to lose. There is always at election time this campaign on public safety. Like, what does that mean? And again, talking about my clients who are now 65, 70-year-old men who spent 30, 40 years in prison, do they really pose a risk to public safety? Did they pose a risk to public safety after 20 years?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what was the cause for them to be kept in for such a long period of time? If it's rehabilitation, that's going to be relative. And so, do we not think that somebody could be rehabilitated and not pose a risk of public safety after 5 years, after a year? You know, so that's why it's discouraging because it is a game. Due to time, you go in, you got to go in front of the board and convince them that you know this person with this mental health diagnosis poses no risk, any more risk than a person who doesn't, or it's discouraging. For a lot of reasons, it's discouraging. Um,
Mm-hmm.
for all the people we get out, it's just more cycling right back in.
Oh my goodness! Wow. Seems to be a pretty layered profession.
Mhm.
You got any like maybe what's the word I'm looking for? Advice for a prospective young attorney, maybe a 17-year-old that probably shouldn't be watching this channel, but just in case they get a hold of it.
I mean, there are ways to get involved and help at every stage of your life, every profession. You know, you don't have to be a person you don't have to be an attorney to care about this stuff. You know, that's one of the other things that I try to do during my work. You don't have to be directly impacted by it. You know, second chance could be an economic issue. We're all doing better when everybody has jobs and access to jobs. And if, you know, my record is 20, 30 years old and I have rehabilitated myself, I should be able to work, you know, because again, we all do better when we're all working. We learned that during COVID. You know, there were a lot of places that went out of business because when things opened up, there was nobody there to work. You know, but there are probably some people who couldn't work if their record wasn't non-automatic disqualified. And so trying to, you know, if this is, you don't have to be directly impacted to care about these issues. Everybody should care about it. And, you know, and I would always say, you know, engage in conversation to change your perspective. You'll be surprised that once you get close to the work, volunteering, going to sit at the courthouse, you know, you can go watch court for free.
Right.
You know, it may change your perspective on what you thought the criminal legal system was, who you thought was committing crimes, because it, you know, there isn't just a type of person. People, all types of people commit crimes. Some people just don't get caught and punished. And so, you know, my advice would be to open your eyes and really get exposed to what the criminal legal system is and it isn't.
Yeah, because it sure isn't nothing that they tell you in K through 12 school. It's nothing like that.
Oh no.
You know, so, but no, we're sitting here with Miss Latoya Bell. Am I supposed to say Esquire?
You don't have to.
Okay, we're sitting here with Miss Latoya Bell, attorney for the Ohio Justice and Policy Center. We're gonna wrap this up. We're gracious to have her with us for the time she spent with us. Do you have any final thoughts you want to give to the listeners?
No, I would just like for you to help me get to the bag one day.
Oh, okay. Yeah, she catches the podcast and and sports bets a little bit. We'll get her right, y'all. But no, thank you for your time. Always a pleasure, Miss Bell. And I'm so proud of you. So happy to see that you're maintaining and dominating the industry so well. So it's a pleasure to see, pleasure to witness it. And best of luck to you.
Thanks so much for having me.